Today, we are diving deep into one of the coolest and, let's be honest, most complicated frontiers in all of science, neurotechnology. We're on this incredible quest to understand and maybe even to change the most mysterious object in the entire known universe, the human brain.
So let's kick things off with a really fundamental problem. For millions and millions of people, conditions like chronic pain or Parkinson's disease can feel completely intractable. Why is it so incredibly hard to fix an organ when its wiring starts to go haywire? Well, that's the central challenge we're going to unpack together.
You have to remember, for most of human history, the brain was a total mystery. It was this black box that nobody could figure out. But that all started to change. Thanks to a wild combination of tragic accidents and absolutely brilliant insights, we slowly, piece by piece, found the keys to unlock its secrets. We were finally turning that black box into a map we could actually read.
So, our first stop is all about cracking that code. This is the story of how we went from thinking the brain was just, one big lump of tissue, to realizing it's much more like a continent with different countries and cities, all responsible for very different things.
And believe it or not, this whole story really kicks into high gear with one of the most famous and frankly unbelievable accidents in all of medical history. Back in 1848, a railway foreman named Phineas Gage had a 3-foot-long iron rod blasted clean through his skull. And the crazy part, he survived. But the man who stood up was not the same man who'd started that day.
This quote, from the people who knew him best, says everything. He was no longer Gage. The physical damage to his brain had completely changed who he was. This was a shocking, profound revelation that our very identity, our personality, is physically rooted in the squishy tissue of our brain.
And the change was just dramatic. Before the accident, Gage was known as this super responsible, hardworking, well-liked guy. Afterwards, with much of his left frontal lobe just gone, he became impulsive, unreliable, and foul-mouthed. The connection between a specific brain area and something as complex as social behavior couldn't have been more clear.
Now, Gage's case wasn't just a one-off. Around the same time, you had researchers like Paul Broca and Carl Wernicke discovering these very specific spots in the brain that were absolutely crucial for speaking and understanding language. The evidence was just piling up. The brain isn't one single thing. It's more like a collection of specialized tools. And this idea has a name: localization.
And the progress from there was just incredible. It starts with Gage in 1848, then Broca maps the speech center. Fast forward to 1909, and a guy named Kabinian-Brodmann has identified 52 distinct functional areas of the cortex. Then, in the 1950s, Walter Penfield starts electrically stimulating the brains of his patients to create this famous, kind of creepy, homunculus map, showing exactly which areas control which body parts. The brain wasn't a black box anymore. It was a territory, and we were charting it.
But just when we thought we were getting the map all figured out, a new discovery popped up that was an absolute game changer. It turned out the map wasn't fixed. The brain could actually redraw itself.
And this game changer is called neuroplasticity. It's the brain's incredible ability to reorganize itself by forging new connections. What this really means is that every single experience you have, everything you learn, physically changes the structure of your brain. It's literally how our neurons remember.
I absolutely love this quote from Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who's basically the father of modern neuroscience. He didn't just see this as some mechanical process. He called it a virtue. What a beautiful way of saying that our brains have this remarkable power to be shaped and improved by the world around us.
So how does this actually work on a physical level? Well, when you learn something, your neurons get stimulated. In response, these tiny little structures on them, called dendritic spines, literally change their shape and size. They get bigger or smaller, strengthening or weakening the connections between neurons. This means learning isn't some abstract concept. It's a full-on physical renovation project happening inside your head, right now.
Okay, so we know the brain has a map, and we know that map can be changed. So the next logical question is, can we be the ones to change it? On purpose? This brings us to our next section, the rise of this incredibly powerful technology that lets us speak the brain's own native language, the language of electricity. And that technology is called neuromodulation. To put it simply, it's a way to tweak nerve activity by sending a targeted stimulus, usually a tiny electrical pulse, to a very precise spot in the brain or nervous system. Think of it like being a sound engineer for the brain, carefully turning the volume up on some circuits and turning it down on others.
And the power of this approach is just staggering. For debilitating chronic pain, you have spinal cord stimulation. For the tremors of Parkinson's disease, deep brain stimulation can be life-changing. It's also being used for epilepsy and even for treatment-resistant depression. We are literally going in and treating faulty circuits right at the source.
So why would you use this? Well, a lot of the time, it's an option when pretty much nothing else is working. When medications either fail or cause awful side effects, neuromodulation offers this incredibly targeted alternative. And here's a huge benefit. It's often reversible. It's not a permanent surgical change, it's an ongoing adjustment, which gives doctors and patients an amazing amount of control.
All right, so we've talked about the brain's map, its hardware, and we've talked about how that hardware can change and adapt. But there's one more layer to this story, and honestly, it might be the most profound of all. We're now moving beyond the hardware and into the brain's software, epigenetics.
For the longest time, the view on genetics was pretty rigid. Your DNA is your destiny. You get what you get from your parents, and that's the end of it. But epigenetics has completely flipped that idea on its head. It shows us that our experiences, our environment, our stress, even our diet, can leave these little chemical marks on our DNA that change how our genes are read. It's like your life experiences are literally rewriting the instruction manual for your body.
And this is where it gets truly mind-bending. There's this concept called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. It means that the epigenetic marks left by one generation's experiences can sometimes be passed down to their children and even their grandchildren, who are never, ever directly exposed to that original event.
A famous experiment shows this perfectly. Scientists taught mice to be afraid of a certain smell by pairing it with a little foot shock. Okay, no surprise, the mice learned to be scared. But here's the crazy part. Their children and even their grandchildren who had never smelled the scent or been shocked in their lives also showed a heightened fear response to that specific smell. A learned fear was passed down through generations biologically. The implication here is just staggering. It means our lives aren't lived in a vacuum. Our experiences, our traumas, and our triumphs can leave a real, physical, biological trace that echoes down our lineage. We are, in a very real sense, carrying the stories of our ancestors around inside our own biology. Which brings us to our final thought. We've gone on this incredible journey, from seeing the brain as a black box, to mapping its every function, to discovering it can change itself, to learning how to speak its language with technology, and now, even realizing that life itself can edit its instruction manual. The power we are building is just immense, and so the great question for our time is no longer can we rewire the brain, but should we?